My name is Laurie Graham. I'm in the Office of Policy for Pharmaceutical Quality, which is one of the sub-offices within CDER's Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, or OPQ. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about how FDA has been assessing facilities during the COVID-19 public health emergency when travel restrictions are in place. I'm going to be talking about both prioritizing inspections and the use of alternate tools to assess facilities during the public health emergency. I'm also going to talk about the impact of the PHE on pending and approved applications. I want to be clear from the start, though, that while I'm presenting information that crosses disciplines at the FDA, I am by no means an expert in all of these areas. However, the good news is that I have experts from around the agency on the panel discussion that follows my presentation who can help fill in any blanks and answer your questions. So, what am I specifically going to be talking about today? I'm going to start by providing some background information on different inspection programs for CDER-regulated drugs. And this is to really establish a foundation for us to then go on and talk about other topics. So once we've kind of built this shared foundation, I'm then going to talk about inspections during the public health emergency. What inspections have we been conducting? Then I'm going to talk about, given our limitations on traveling, what alternative tools has the FDA been using to assess facilities? And then finally, I want to talk about pending applications and supplements. For example, how are pending applications impacted by the travel restrictions and the use of alternate tools? I want to point out that all of the information in my presentation comes from publicly available documents, which I will be providing in the next few slides. I also have some additional references on some of my slides. I really want to encourage you to take a look at all of the documents and references in my presentation. They really may be helpful to you in answering some of the questions we may not get to today or questions that come up after the webinar. So first up is an FDA COVID guidance for industry. This guidance is on manufacturing, supply chain, and drug and biological product inspections during the COVID-19 public health emergency. It is in a question and answer format. So this guidance provides information on, among other things, how FDA has been prioritizing inspections during the pandemic, how we will prioritize inspections as travel restrictions are lifted, the alternate tools that the FDA has been using to assess facilities, and the impact of the pandemic on pending and approved applications. Next up is another FDA COVID guidance. And this guidance goes into details about one specific alternate tool that FDA has in our arsenal, that is the use of remote interactive evaluations such as live stream video to examine facilities. This guidance provides much more detail about remote interactive evaluations than I'm going to be able to cover in my presentation today. For example, this guidance provides details on things like how FDA selects and notifies a facility about remote interactive evaluations. It includes special considerations for different inspection programs. It talks about how to prepare for remote interactive evaluation, how we will conduct the evaluation, including things such as technological requirements. It will go into how we intend to evaluate documents and records. And finally, it talks about communications between the FDA and firms. For example, how FDA intends to communicate our observations. Another great resource that I highly recommend that you take a look at is the Resiliency Roadmap for FDA Inspectional Oversight. This document details not only the effect of the pandemic on our inspectional activities for each regulated commodity in FDA's portfolio, but it also provides a detailed plan for a more consistent state of operations moving forward. It also presents our priorities moving forward. If you take a look at this document, what you'll see is that our plan runs through different scenarios. It runs through a base case scenario, a best case scenario, and a worst case scenario. And the reason that we provide these different scenarios is just because of the continued uncertainty of the ongoing pandemic. If you take a look at this document, you also see that it runs through our plan to address postponed inspectional work using a risk-based approach. And the final resource I just want to bring your attention to is Dr. Woodcocks' testimony to the Senate Committee of Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. This testimony provides a good overview of the FDA response to and FDA activities during the COVID-19 public health emergency. And again, while my presentation is very much focused on CDER-regulated products and manufacturing and testing facilities, some of the references that I'm providing here, such as this testimony and the resiliency document, actually talks about all of FDA's commodities. Okay, so now let's dive into talking about the different inspection programs. And again, I'm going to be talking about inspection programs as they relate to CDER-regulated products. My intent here, again, is to just provide a good framework for the presentation. So, for example, to just go through the purpose of each of the inspection programs. And this framework will then be sort of useful as we go through the rest of the presentation. So first up are pre-approval and pre-license inspections. These are risk-based application-specific inspections associated with pending marketing applications and supplements to approved applications. And just to give you a feel for this, when FDA assesses a facility in a pending application, we're considering all of the information we know about that facility in the context of the application and the risks that we've identified. So, for example, when we look at a facility in an application, one of the first things we would ask then, right, is, well, does this facility have any experience with the operations listed in the application? There are a number of objectives that we have associated with these types of inspections. There's three main objectives to a pre-approval inspection. We want to ensure that the facilities in the applications can perform the manufacturing operations in conformance to current good manufacturing practice requirements. We want to verify conformance to the application. So when we look at the application and we sort of get an understanding of what the control strategy is in that application, we then, when we're in the facility, for example, well, then we make sure that that is actually the control strategy that's being used in the facility. And we also use these inspections to confirm that the data submitted in the application are accurate and complete. Next is another type of risk-based application-specific inspection. That is the post-approval inspection. These inspections can, for example, be necessitated by the residual risks associated with product, process, or facilities that we have identified. The need for these inspections can be determined during the review of an application or post-approval. So, for example, when we're reviewing a pending application, we may be seeing some residual risk, but we've determined that the best way for us to try to take a look at those residual risks is through a post-approval inspection. In the context of a specific application, then, these inspections can, for example, address changes to manufacturing operations. They can help us evaluate process validation activities. They can help us take a look at changes submitted to the application. They can help us look at the execution of supporting activities according to application commitments and CGMP requirements. Now let's talk about surveillance inspections. As detailed in Section 510H of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the FDA uses a risk-based approach to prioritizing human manufacturing sites for routine domestic and foreign CGMP surveillance inspections. The risk factors that we use are outlined in the FDA Act, but for CDER, they are further detailed in a publicly available Manual of Policies and Procedures, or MAP, M-A-P-P. This particular MAP that I'm talking about details the model that CDER uses to prioritize sites for routine surveillance inspections. If you're interested in taking a look at that map, you can just go on the internet and search on CDER MAP, M-A-P-P, and it will take you to our CDER's map site, which provides all of our maps, and then you can find our site selection model map. So when we talk about surveillance inspections, what do I mean by a surveillance inspection? What is the point of a surveillance inspection? Well, surveillance inspections allow us to examine overall operations, including controls that ensure manufacturing processes produce quality drugs, thereby reducing the risk of adulterated or misbranded drugs reaching consumers and patients. We use surveillance inspections to evaluate the cGMP compliance of manufacturing operations. So next are follow-up and compliance inspections. These are sort of for-cause inspections or follow-up and compliance inspections. They are intended to follow up on specific quality, facility, or compliance issues. And finally, while I've indicated sort of multiple times in my talk, I'm from the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, and my presentation is really focused on product quality and the evaluation of manufacturing and testing facilities. I do want to be clear that there's other inspection programs at CDER, and I don't want to sort of just completely ignore them. So I want to bring your attention to bioresearch monitoring inspections. So I want to point out that the evaluation of sites involved in generating clinical and non-clinical data for FDA-approved products is critical. Inspections of these sites is part of the BIMO program. This program protects the rights, safety, and welfare of research subjects, verifies the accuracy, reliability, and integrity of clinical and non-clinical data submitted to the FDA, and assesses compliance with FDA's regulations governing the conduct of clinical and non-clinical trials. So now that we have this kind of shared foundational understanding of the different inspection programs that impact CDER-regulated products, let's start to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency on the evaluation of facilities that manufacture or test CDER-regulated drugs. So I'm going to start to walk through a timeline of the public health emergency with a focus on inspections. So on January 31st, 2020, Health and Human Services issued a declaration of a public health emergency related to COVID-19. On March 13th, 2020, the President declared a national emergency in response to COVID-19. In March 2020, FDA paused domestic and foreign surveillance inspections. However, we continued to conduct domestic and foreign mission-critical inspections. So, what do I mean by mission-critical? Mission-critical includes drugs and biologics that have received breakthrough therapy designation, have received orphan drug designation, or have received regenerative medicine advanced therapy designation. It includes drugs and biologics that are on the drug shortage list or Stiber's regulated product shortage list. It includes drugs and biologics that are used for critical care or as a medical countermeasure. And finally, it includes drugs and biologics used to diagnose, treat, mitigate, cure, or prevent a serious disease or medical condition, including COVID-19, for which there is no other appropriate and available treatment. So, what types of inspections can be mission critical? Both for-cause and pre-approval, pre-licensing inspections can be deemed mission critical. So, once we have a product that we consider to be mission critical, what do we consider in determining whether to actually conduct that inspection? What are the safety considerations? So, we take into account the safety of a number of different folks. FDA considers the safety of our investigators, the safety of employees at the site or facility, and where applicable, the safety of clinical trial participants and other patients at investigator sites. So, just an interesting fact to bring to your attention, from March 2020 through March 2021, FDA conducted a total of 821 mission-critical inspections. And I want to point out that mission-critical inspections includes both domestic and foreign sites. So now let's continue on our timeline. So previously we were at March 2020, and we were talking about we were going to be doing mission-critical inspections. In July 2020, FDA announced that we were going to be resuming prioritized domestic inspections. So prioritized domestic inspections are prioritized according to a number of factors, such as whether the inspection is needed to support product approval, where no other application deficiencies are known that would preclude approval, inspections considered high risk under statutory inspection frequency mandates, inspections intended to follow up on our previous violative inspection, or inspections that otherwise maximize our use of limited inspectional resources to achieve the greatest public health benefit during the COVID-19 public health emergency. These domestic prioritized inspections use the red, yellow, green rating system to assist us in determining when and where it would be safest to conduct prioritized domestic inspections. Pre-approval, pre-license surveillance, and for-cause inspections can be considered prioritized domestic inspections, and during the public health emergency, domestic inspections are being pre-announced. So just another interesting fact to share with you. As of March 2021, the agency has conducted a total of 777 prioritized domestic inspections since we resumed this work in July 2020. So finally, in our timeline is May 5th, 2021. This is where we issued our Resiliency Roadmap for FDA Inspectional Oversight. I previously talked to you about this document and how it outlines the agency's inspectional activities during the pandemic and our detailed plan moving forward for a more consistent state of operations. Okay, so now let's start to talk about alternate tools to assess facilities. So, shown here are the tools that I'm going to be discussing. So first we have the ability of the FDA to use information from other regulatory health authorities and inspectorates. For example, the use of foreign inspection reports under a mutual recognition agreement, information we can acquire under a confidentiality agreement, and information that we may gain from inspections from other PICS members. I'm also going to talk about record requests under the FDA Act, remote interactive evaluations, and then other tools that we have in our arsenal to assure the quality of products that reach the American public, such as import examinations, sampling, and testing. So first up then, let's talk about the use of information from other regulatory health authorities and inspectorates. I want to direct you to a PICS document which provides a framework for using inspection reports from PICS members. In addition, as I've already mentioned, we do have confidentiality agreements with other agencies which allows specified confidential commercial information to be shared. What I want to focus on here is the reliance on foreign inspection reports under a mutual recognition agreement. So currently under mutual recognition agreements, the FDA relies upon CGMP inspections conducted by EU and UK inspectorates. And this includes not just relying upon inspections that those inspectorates perform in their home territories, but also inspections performed in third countries. So, for example, a European inspectorate doing an inspection outside of their home territory. I'd like to make a really important point at this point in the presentation, that these inspections that I'm talking about, these CGMP inspections being conducted under a mutual recognition agreement, these are considered inspections under Section 510H of the FDA Act. So these do count as FDA inspections under the FDA Act. That is not the case for the other alternate tools that I'm going to be talking about during my presentation. So I just want to make sure it's clear that when we're talking about alternate tools, the majority of the times, those do not count as an FDA inspection. What I'm talking about here are inspections under mutual recognition agreements, these types of CGMP inspections that do in fact count as an inspection under Section 510H of the FDA Act. In addition, I want to make it clear that currently FDA uses surveillance inspections under mutual recognition agreements. So foreign inspectorates are not conducting pre-approval or pre-license inspections for the FDA. However, the information that we gain from foreign inspection reports contributes to the totality of the information we have for facilities, and it helps us in assessing facilities in pending applications. So next up, I would like to talk about requests under Section 704A4 of the FDA Act. Under this section of the FDA Act, FDA is allowed to request in advance or in lieu of an inspection within a reasonable time frame within reasonable limits and in a reasonable manner records or information that we would otherwise be able to inspect. When we make one of these record requests, sites have 15 days to respond to the request unless translation is needed, and then they have up to 30 days to respond to the request. So this next part will not be intuitive. While I have said that record requests are in advance or in lieu of an inspection, these requests are not considered inspections under Section 510H of the FDA Act. An inspection still involves, inspection under Section 510H of the FDA Act still involves an investigator being boots on the ground at the facility. However, if a firm fails to cooperate with our record request, which again are part of the statute, the FDA can deem the relevant drugs at these establishments to be adulterated. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see a reference to an FDA staff manual guide. That's SMG 9004.1. I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that SMG if you'd like to learn more about our policies and processes around 70484 record requests. So next up are remote interactive evaluations. So what do I mean by this? I'm talking about sort of live stream video, teleconference, screen sharing of data and documents. Unlike 70484 requests for which there is statutory authority, remote interactive evaluations are currently voluntary, so they are not statutory. Similar to 70484 requests, they are not considered inspections under Section 510H of the FDA Act. So FDA uses risk management methods and tools to determine what facilities to utilize a remote interactive evaluation with. What I want to highlight at this point and make sure it's clear, I'm talking about a lot of different tools that we have in our arsenal. These tools do not work in isolation. We can combine different tools. So for example, we could combine a 70484 record request with a remote interactive evaluation. The other point I want to make sure is clear. It's the FDA that decides what tools and methods we're going to use to assess the facilities. So for example, we don't accept requests from facilities to perform a remote interactive evaluation. Again, it's the FDA that decides how we're going to assess any particular facility. So I've already mentioned the guidance document, the FDA COVID guidance document on remote interactive evaluations. I'm not going to repeat that information here, but I do encourage you to take a look at that guidance document as it does provide a great deal of detail about remote interactive evaluations. So now I want to touch briefly upon other means that FDA has to assure the quality of drugs that make their way to the American public. We have an import examination and sampling program. This involves both physical examination of products and product sampling. We can therefore refuse admission of products that do not meet standards for safety, effectiveness, or quality. In this import program, we work directly with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, to target products that violate applicable legal requirements. And we use a predictive risk-based evaluation tool called PREDICT, which allows us to focus on specific products with heightened concerns. We also have drug quality surveillance and testing program. This program targets products for testing based upon specific risk-based criteria, with the drug quality testing being performed to ensure the quality of the nation's drug supply. This program, in combination with other programs, is really integral to FDA's overall post-marketing surveillance strategy. Under this program, we can sample both APIs and finished dosage forms that are manufactured domestically or internationally. Samples can be collected in various ways, directly from the manufacturer, from a distributor, at time of import, or via retail purchases. And we do for-cost sampling or statistically designed sampling plans. And here's just an interesting fact about our importation program. Since March 2020, with the cooperation and in coordination with CBP, FDA has received and destroyed almost 60,000 products, totaling over 11 million capsules, pieces, and tablets of illegal or unapproved drugs. And since March 2020, we have refused approximately 94,000 lines of imported violative medical products. So, as I've previously mentioned, again, my talk is very much focused on product quality and drug manufacturing and testing. I want to point out that many of the principles that I've been talking about in my presentation do apply to BIMO. So, for example, in assessing BIMO sites, FDA also considers things like the inspection history, information from other regulatory health authorities. We request records and information. We do remote interactive evaluations. However, I do want to be very clear that there are statutory differences between drug facilities and BIMO sites. So the statutory information that I have in my presentation is about drug manufacturing facility, and it does not necessarily apply to BIMO sites. So this brings us to the last part of my presentation, which is on pending applications and supplements. So I want to start out to be really clear on a couple of things. One is, during the public health emergency, FDA continues to assess all applications for all disciplines, where all manufacturing facilities will be evaluated using a risk-based approach consistent with existing guidelines. During the public health emergency, we are using all available tools and sources of information to support regulatory decisions on applications that include sites impacted by travel restrictions due to COVID-19. So we are strategically applying a holistic approach in our decision-making process to determine if an inspection is warranted or if an inspection is not warranted due to the totality of the information that we have, including information gained through the use of alternate tools. So in the next few slides, I'm going to start to walk through the review process and the regulatory decision-making process. I'll point out at the start that we are working with facilities to communicate issues with them. So if we use an alternate tool and we have an issue with the facility, we're going to communicate that issue with the facility. So this includes, for example, remote interactive evaluations, review of records, or other information that we request. We're also trying to use the response from these facilities in our regulatory decision making. So if we get a response from the facility, to the extent possible and as feasible, we're considering that response before taking any action on a pending application or supplement. What I hope that I've already sort of conveyed to you is that decisions regarding applications is based on the totality of the information available to the FDA, including information obtained from the use of alternate tools. So now let's start to walk through some application decisions. So first I want to talk about approval. So if available information, including information obtained from the use of alternate tools, supports the adequacy of the facility and sites named in pending application, no other deficiencies have been identified, and the application otherwise satisfies the requirement for approval, then we can take an approval action. In this case, for example, the need for an inspection could have been sufficiently mitigated by our use of alternate tools, including a firm's response to outstanding issues identified through the use of those alternate tools. Next, I want to talk about a situation where we just have inadequate information about a facility. And by inadequate, I mean insufficient. So it's not that we have found something is wrong with the facility. We just don't have enough information to make a decision about a facility. So, for example, where there's no inspection history and we decide we really do need boots on the ground at this facility, there's no way we can get there during travel restrictions. So we're in a situation where we don't really have a deficiency for the facility. We haven't identified something adverse about the facility or their ability to perform the operations described in the application. It's just we're in a situation where we have insufficient information. And I want to make sure that distinction is clear, because there is a difference between we have information about a facility that is sort of calling into question their ability to perform the operations in the application, where we just don't have enough information or sufficient information to make a decision. So what I'm talking about here is where we have insufficient information available to make a determination on the acceptability of a facility or site. If we're in this situation, we don't have enough information about the facility to make a decision, and no other disciplines have deficiencies, we will miss the goal date. That is, we're going to defer our decision. So I want to really make sure it's clear here that we only issue a deficiency for a facility when we have adverse information about the facility that, for example, calls into question the ability of that facility to perform the operations in the application. Travel restrictions alone do not constitute a deficiency. Okay. So what happens if we defer action and we decide to miss the goal date? We will inform the applicant of the situation as soon as possible during review of the application. As we get to the goal date, and we miss the goal date, the project manager for the application will contact the applicant and explain the situation. In this case, therefore, let me be clear, there's no submission or communication needed by the applicant to ensure that an inspection will be scheduled to support application approval. So if we defer action on your application, you don't need to submit anything to us or communicate anything to us in order for us to schedule that inspection. We will take care of it. So now let's talk about a complete response. So first, I'm going to talk about a complete response with a facility deficiency. So in this case, we do have available information from a prior FDA or mutual recognition agreement inspection, or the use of an alternate tool where we've identified concerns about the adequacy of a facility, and an inspection is needed to address those concerns. And that inspection cannot be completed during the review cycle. Or we've used an alternate tool, we've gotten some responses to outstanding issues identified from those alternate tools, but the information that we received is really just not sufficient or adequate to address the issues. So in this case, again, we've identified issues with the facility. So we have specific concerns about the facility and their ability to perform the operations in the application. So in this case, we have a facility deficiency. So during the review, where we do have this information that calls into question the adequacy of the facility or site, we will inform the applicant of the issues as soon as possible during the review of the application. Specifically, we will inform the applicant that inspection will be needed before the application can be approved, and that the inspection may not be conducted before the action due date due to restrictions on travel. If the inspection has not been conducted by the action date, FDA generally intends to issue a CR letter, including a deficiency related to the facility or site. And next up, I want to talk about a complete response with the deficiency comment, with a facility comment, not a facility deficiency. And I want to make sure that distinction is clear. So in the previous example, we actually had a specific concern about the facility. So we identified something about the facility that gave us cause for concern that they were not going to be able to perform the operations in the application. And then we had the case where we deferred action, right, where we just had a lack of information about the facility, but no other disciplines had deficiencies. So now I want to talk about, well, we actually are in a situation where we lack information about the facility. So we're kind of in that deferral arena. We have a lack of information about the facility, but other disciplines have identified deficiencies. So maybe clinical has identified a deficiency, maybe somebody else has identified a CMC issue, a drug product or a drug substance specification issue. Another discipline has identified a deficiency in this case. So we recognize that an inspection is necessary because there is insufficient information. So again, from a facility standpoint, we're in that same situation we were in when we deferred action. However, we do have other disciplines that have deficiencies in this case. So we are going to have to issue the CR with those other deficiencies. So during the review cycle, we'll inform the applicant of the facility or site issues, and that we'll inform the applicant that inspection is going to be needed to approve the application, but may not be conducted before the action date due to restrictions on travel. In this case, we will not include a facility or site deficiency in the CR letter because we don't have an actual deficiency for the facility. We haven't identified anything that is an issue for that facility in terms of the operations identified in the application. What we have is a lack of information. So we will not be issuing a facility deficiency. What we will be doing is issuing a CR and listing the deficiencies from the other disciplines. The facility will be listed as a comment in that CR letter. So in the CR letter, we will list the other deficiencies and we will include a non-deficiency facility or site comment stating that an inspection will be needed to support approval of the application because there is insufficient information available to make a determination on the acceptability of a facility or site. Okay, and finally, today I want to talk about supplements to approved application. So FDA recognizes that during the pandemic, applicants may need to make some changes post-approval. So that we might need to make post-approval changes to address a drug shortage or, for example, a drug shortage caused by supply disruptions or post-approval changes to maybe accelerate production of a COVID-19 related treatment. So while we're always encouraging folks to make improvements post-approval through the submission of supplements, we recognize that there may be some unique situations during a pandemic. And that while we encourage you to follow existing guidance on post-approval changes, we are willing to consider requests from applicants to submit certain changes using a lower reporting category based on risk mitigation information for marketing applications related to products in shortage or products intended to diagnose, treat, mitigate, cure, or prevent COVID-19. So I just want to sort of clarify here that, again, we encourage you to submit post-approval supplements to applications following existing guidelines, but we recognize that there are some unusual circumstances because of the pandemic where products may be going into drug shortage because of supply issues, where folks are needing to ramp up production of certain products such as COVID-19 related treatments. So we encourage you, if you're in this situation and you need to talk to us or need us to consider an atypical or flexible submission strategy, then you should contact us through our CDER OPQ inquiries mailbox so that we can sort of talk to you and maybe help you sort of get some of the changes that you needed implemented. So in conclusion, I hope that I've been clear, and I hope everybody understands that we are using all available tools to assess sites named in pending applications and supplements at CDER. Inspections continue. For example, inspections for mission critical products continue. Applications will not automatically receive a complete response. We are not issuing complete responses just because of travel restrictions. And finally, we encourage you to continue to submit supplements and to follow existing guidances for post-approval changes. If you need atypical or flexible strategies because of drug shortages or because of COVID-19 related treatments, please contact us at CDER OPQ inquiries at fda.hhs.gov. And I want to thank you very much for your time and attention today. And I look forward to a productive panel discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the great presentation. We'll now transition into our final Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions in the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Joining Laurie Graham, we welcome back Commander Tara Gooen Bizjak. Also participating on the Q&A panel, we welcome Derek Smith, Deputy Director, Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment, OPQ, CDER. Alonza Cruse, Director, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Operations, Office of Medical Products and Tobacco Operations, ORA, and Neil Stiber, Associate Director, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Surveillance, OPQ, CDER. For our first question to our panel, we're going to do a combination question again. I'll first go to Commander Bizjak, and then she'll pass over to Alonza for a follow-up. And here's the question. Can you provide more information on when a for-cause inspection would be considered mission critical?
Thank you, Captain Ford, for the question. So depending on the potential risk to public health, the need for this kind of, the need for a for-cause inspection may be considered mission critical, again, depending on the potential risk to public health. And as described in the guidance that Laurie mentioned, manufacturing, supply chain, and inspections during COVID-19, it describes mission critical inspections as ones where there's a public health benefit of U.S. patients having access to the product that's subject to inspection, and it includes factors such as breakthrough therapy designation, orphan drug designation, or regenerative medicine advanced therapy designation, for example, as well as being included on the shortage list, and there are other examples described in the guidance. So it's really dependent on the specific drugs that are manufactured at the facility in terms of deeming for-cause inspection mission critical. Alonza?
Let me just add on, the premise of the question was, will we consider for-cause or OAI for-cause inspections mission critical? We do have a number of assignments that have been deemed OAI for-cause follow-up inspection that have been deemed mission critical, and they have, and many of them have already been scheduled for an inspection, some of which are underway. So we are moving into that path and recognize that that these are, as Tara has mentioned, these are critical, important products. So we have already deemed some mission critical, some are underway, some are completed, and some are pending a foreign inspection.
Thank you both for responding to that question. We're going to go back over to Commander Bizjak for the following question. How does OMQ review the high absenteeism notifications?
Thank you for the question, and I'm glad to be able to address this. This came up in the first panel, and I just wanted to mention that The review of the high absenteeism notifications is a collaborative effort with OPQ and OMQ, and we do look at them and add them as information for the next inspection, and we'll look to see if some of the activities that were delayed or reduced in frequency or substituted are consistent with, the risk-based that's described in the guidance. So we will take a look at that, and that's done collaboratively with OPQ. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. Well, now we'll go back over to Alonza for a few questions, and here's the first question. When is it realistic that Site 4 and site inspections will start again? Are there plans to first start visiting safer areas like Europe compared to stronger hotspots such as India, or go anywhere where there is no strict lockdown or only avoiding variant risk areas?
Okay, thank you for the question, and for purposes and I guess for ease of the response, I'm going to sort of break it into a number of responses. First, as was mentioned earlier, under the Resiliency Roadmap, that speaks to primarily our return to conducting domestic surveillance inspections. I should also note that throughout the pandemic, we continue to conduct foreign inspections, albeit those that were deemed mission critical. With regards to resumption of inspections in the EU, as was mentioned earlier, we do work with the EU under a mutual recognition agreement, in which inspections that are done in their countries, and it should be a site that we have interest in, we would request a report, and they would provide as such as we would of reports in the United States here. One other thing that I didn't hear mentioned in some of the earlier discussions, but I could have missed it, was we've also expanded the use of the MRA, if you will, to include countries and inspections that EU member countries may have performed in other countries. We have been reaching out and asking for those reports as well. We've been referring to those internally as third country MRA reports. Regarding a more routine to surveillance inspections, we have a prioritized list of categories of mission critical OAI follow-up inspections before we get down to some of the other categories being more surveillance in nature. So we are looking to prioritize as many mission critical inspections followed by OAI follow-up inspections. We are closely monitoring conditions across the globe and looking at when and where it is safe to travel. It's important to note that although we have staff in our foreign offices in both China and in India, both countries have had significant travel restrictions within countries, even restricting work that we're even restricting travel of staff already stationed in the country. We continue to work with the State Department and Embassy on ease of travel through those countries, and it's something that is pretty much a daily, weekly occurrence for us, really trying to get a real-time assessment of conditions on the ground with regards to travel. So no specific timeline as to when we'll get more inspections accomplished. I can tell you that one other point I wanted to make is that we are looking to to do detailees, assign people short term into these countries, something that we are working on with both the foreign offices and our office here in headquarters.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a couple more questions for Alonza, and here's the next question. We'd like to know, when will foreign inspections occur, particularly in India, for API firms having an OAI status?
Okay, thank you for the question. I sort of touched upon it now. So we have prioritized a number of those as mission critical. Those the staff in the India office has those assignments now. We have two detailees that's in India right now, and to assist on those, and we are looking to put additional staff out there temporarily. So as you would imagine, we have quite a few OAI follow-up inspections to get through, and we are working to put the additional resources in country as best we can. There are, following the travel restrictions within country and other safety protocols that we have to go through, we are certainly working with our counterparts in India and working with our staff that's stationed in our India office. I don't have a specific date as these increases are occurring, as we're able to get resources into the country.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Alonza in this round, and here's the question. Are there any countries or regions that FDA is currently restricted from traveling due to the pandemic, even for mission-critical pre-approval inspections?
First, let me say that even before COVID, there are countries that we probably would not have traveled to. So it's any travel restrictions from that perspective. It's other issues that'll likely involve. Certainly, many countries have restrictions within country, and certainly travelers from outside of country coming in. One other thing that I'll mention now is that many times on the travel mission critical form that we are doing, we have to go through a period of isolation when we get there, lasting up to 3 weeks at times. Depending on the country. So we've been managing to, when deemed important or mission critical, to work with the State Department and the countries to gain access into those restrictive countries. Let me also add that something that I meant to mention earlier. There was a period last year in which we had to conduct what we refer to as administrative departure. So the State Department had deemed China an opportunity, or a time in which which all staff in the embassies, absent a few that remained behind, were evacuated back to their safe haven. So for our staff in the China office, that would have been coming back to U.S. or possibly another country. So that was lifted, and then we had staff return. And we also had a similar administrative departure for India and India staff. Now, staff have since returned. And upon return to the India office, there were some additional restrictions as the course of the coronavirus was expanding again. within country. So it's something that we have to watch rather closely in terms of how folks are traveling. We have had people stranded in country, stranded at a hotel, stranded in other places for which there was no resources to them. So I heard during Laurie's presentation, she speaks to the safety of investigators. That is certainly a real and present danger of activity that we too are looking at.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question will be directed to Derek. And here is the question. What is the difference between remote evaluation and a real PAI? Will the FDA have a PAI even after the remote evaluation?
Thanks, Ray. And so I think Laurie did a great job covering that first part of the question during her presentation. And as she noted, the remote interactive evaluations and the other regulatory alternate tools to inspection are not considered an inspection under the Act. And so I just want to reiterate that. And so as we conduct and use the various alternative tools, including remote interactive evaluations, the teams that are involved in these evaluations will attempt to gain the information that they are seeking to address the risks that have been identified during the application assessment related to the manufacturing implementation at the facility. And so in some cases, those tools will be able to address those risks, and in other cases, those tools may not be able to address the risks. They may identify deficiencies, or they may lead to additional questions that then require further activity at the facility and then require an inspection. So in general, we are using all of these alternative tools, including remote interactive evaluations, to do everything that we can to address the risks that the teams are identifying to cover at the facilities. But in the end, if those risks are not addressed, an inspection will then be necessary to complete the assessment, or perhaps as a follow-up, either post-approval or in the next submission cycle if the application is CR.
Thanks for responding to that question. We have another combination question, panel discussion coming in. First, for addressed to Laurie, and then Laurie can answer, and then pass over to Derek. The question is for Laurie first. Many of the additional inspection tolls are meant for European countries where an MRA exists. Has FDA developed ways to utilize alternative tools with non-European countries?
Thanks. Can everybody hear me okay? So let me just point out, so when we talk about European countries and MRA, yes, we do have mutual recognition agreements with the UK and in the EU, but that does not mean that we're sort of restricted to just information from those regulatory health authorities. Like I tried to sort of highlight in my presentation, we're using all of the available information about a site. So we will even use inspection reports from non-MRA countries to help us sort of understand a facility and understanding sort of where a facility is at, what the risks are associated with a particular facility. So when, for example, we're reviewing an application, we would sort of consider all of the information available to us. So let me stop there and turn it over to Derek to get his perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Yes, and in terms of the application assessment, we are looking at all of the information that is available from our regulatory partners that we have confidentiality agreements with to see what their inspections have covered with respect to the applications under assessment and determining if that information is sufficient to then pursue other additional alternative tools rather than an inspection. And so we are using both the mutual recognition agreement information from Europe, but also PICS information as one example. And I believe we also wanted to turn this over to Neil just for some comments related to the surveillance side.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. This is Neil from the surveillance perspective. Just want to reiterate what Derek had said, that for surveillance as well, we, as has been mentioned, only the MRA inspections can serve as equivalent of FDA inspections, but we do use other inspections and other information that we gather from other partnerships when there are confidentiality agreements in place. And so, for example, through PICS relationships, we're able to obtain inspections, and those can be used to gain a better understanding of risks, but it can't be used as our own inspections. So thanks for that question.
Thank you to our panel for that panel discussion. And our next couple of questions are directed to Derek. And here's the next question. Could you please comment on the agency's current views regarding PAIs for foreign manufacturing facilities? Will the agency conduct a virtual inspection and complete the PAIs while the travel restriction is still in place due to COVID-19 and subsequently approve the pending applications, NDA or ANDA, based on virtual inspections?
Thanks, Ray. Yes, so with respect to I'll take this at a higher level to all pre-approval inspections. So we may use a combination of the various alternative tools that Laurie discussed in her presentation from 70484 records request, remote interactive evaluations, and inspections to complete the assessment that is needed and address the risks that have been identified that have triggered the need for the pre-approval inspection to support the application decision. And so we will do everything we can to use those tools to complete the assessment during the review cycle and complete it and complete where travel restrictions are in place for domestic operations, as Alonza has noted, have resumed to normal, and for those foreign inspections that are considered mission critical in support of mission critical applications. And in the event that we do not use an inspection, but we use an alternative tool like a remote interactive evaluation, there is the potential that those interactions and assessments will address the risks that the teams have identified and lead to the approval of an application solely based on an alternative tool.
Thanks for responding to that question. We have one final question for Derek in this round, and here's the question. Does FDA independently obtain inspection reports related to PAIs from foreign health authorities, or are these provided by the facility?
Thanks for the question. So in general, we are relying on obtaining the information through the current existing channels that we have with the other health authorities under the various agreements that we have in place. In the event that we need additional information, we will certainly reach out to the facilities and request that information and ask them to voluntarily provide that to us. If we need to be able to get more details or faster information due to timing of various travels and production schedules and things like that to facilitate the planning of any needed PAIs that may occur. And I don't know if Alonza or Neil have any further comments related to obtaining the inspection reports through MRA or PICS.
This is Alonza. I would, just sort of reiterate and strengthen the comments that you made We have certainly, I mentioned, us reaching out to third country MRA PICS and the use of PICS reports, confidentiality agreements in place where we have confidentiality agreements are all tools that we have and will continue to use. Certainly the pandemic has allowed us to certainly expand upon the use of those activities, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another dual panel question that came in, and the question will be addressed to Laurie and then Commander Bizjak. And here's the question, Laurie, first. Is there a practical application for evaluations that are not considered for an FDA inspection under Section 510H3 of the FD&C Act for approval decisions for pending applications or closure of warning letters, OAI status of a facility?
Thank you for the question. So I'll start and I'll let Tara jump in, particularly when it comes to talking about closure of warning letters and OAI status. So like I've tried to highlight, we are using all of the available information that we have to the extent possible. So while some of these tools are not considered inspections under the Act, again, we're using information from those tools to try and make application decisions. There are certain situations when nothing but an FDA inspection will do, right? So if you have a brand new facility that we've never inspected, we may need boots on the ground to do an inspection of that facility. So the use of these alternate tools will not help us. But to the extent possible, we're using the alternate tools to get the information that we need to make regulatory decisions. And let me turn it over to Tara to talk about the use of tools for closing out warning letters and OAI status. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. In terms of warning letters and OAI status, so early in the pandemic, we took a look at the data related to OAI for-cause follow-up inspections after a warning letter. And the data showed that a majority of the time, over 50% of the time, the site remained OAI. And based on that data, we looked at that and said, okay, the information that we're getting from the remote evaluations is helpful and useful. However, generally does not suffice in order to change the OAI status of a facility, and that's further described in the guidance, the RIE guidance. So that's why generally we do. We will do an inspection for an OAI facility in terms of evaluating whether or not the site is in compliance or not. So thank you for the question.
Thank you for the panel responding to that question. The next few questions are for Laurie, and here's the next question. For PAI inspections, does FDA accept inspection reports from MRA partners?
Thanks for the question. So we don't actually have foreign inspectorates doing pre-approval inspections for us. So again, pre-approval inspections are very much application focused. So it's based upon the application in front of the FDA. So we don't have foreign inspectorates doing pre-approval and pre-licensing inspections for us, but the information that they gather from their reports and that we look at can help us in our understanding of sort of the CGMP compliance of a site, which helps us in assessing a facility. But we do not have foreign inspectorates doing pre-approval or pre-license inspections for us. But let me pause there, and I would like maybe Derek to weigh in on this as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, and that's correct. So the way in which we are using the mutual recognition agreement on the pre-approval in the pre-approval space is looking at the coverage that has been provided, through an inspection that is under the MRA, understanding how that coverage and findings impacts the application, the proposed control strategy at the facility that we're assessing, and then determining from there if that information can be used to mitigate the need for an inspection or pursue other alternative tools such as records requests or remote interactive evaluation, or if we indeed need to conduct an inspection. And this may be a question later, but the MRA findings may also identify deficiencies that could then also lead to a potential CR action on the application.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next couple of questions is again for Laurie, and here's the next question. Do you anticipate changes in FDA procedures to allow records, requests, and alternative tools such as virtual to replace the current boots on the ground requirement for official routine surveillance inspections?
Thank you for the question. So let me just be clear that currently sort of the alternate tools that I've talked about, record requests, remote interactive evaluations, they do not meet the statutory definition of an inspection from an FDA standpoint. Again, an FDA inspection, our interpretation of the FDNC Act is it is boots on the ground in the facility. So without a statutory change, they will not be considered inspections under 510H of the FDNC Act. But again, we're using the information from those inspections to the extent possible to gather information that we need on facilities to make regulatory decisions. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. I have a couple more questions for Laurie, and here's the next one. Does FDA ask a foreign regulatory body or inspector to conduct a PAI and subsequently complete the review of a pending application such as an NDA or ANDA based on the foreign inspector's PAI report?
Yes, thanks for that question. So again, we do not have foreign inspectorates doing pre-approval or pre-licensing inspections for us. We use the information that they may have gathered in their surveillance inspections to provide information for us on a facility. And if that information from a surveillance inspection, for example, indicates that there's a compliance issue at that facility, we would issue a complete response to the application, but we don't specifically do a pre-approval inspection or a pre-license inspection using foreign inspectorates. But thank you for the question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one last question for Laurie in this round, and here's the question. Can a foreign health authority inspection finding result in a CRL?
Yes, thanks for that question. So yes, it can. So as I've indicated, the foreign inspectorate, for example, provides that general CGMP coverage of a facility. We look at that report and we find that the conditions, for example, are violative. We will use that information in our assessment of the application, and that would be a facility deficiency, which would be in the complete response letter. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We had a question come in for Neil, and here's the question. Does the FDA have a maximum length of time between surveillance inspections, and are they prioritizing inspection of such facilities?
Okay, thank you for the question. So in general, the maximum amount of time that FDA wants between surveillance inspections is 5 years, and that is a factor in the site selection model. So if a site has not received an inspection and it's approaching the 5th year, then that would elevate it up on the prioritized list of sites for inspection, but that all presumes that there are resources and ability to inspect in those places. And given the situation with COVID in the past year and a half, that has often not been possible, as everyone's aware too. So that is a constraint, but in general, yes, 5 years is the maximum amount of time between surveillance inspections.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a few more questions coming in for Alonza, and here's the next question. Will manufacturers be notified that the FDA has reviewed a foreign inspection report under mutual recognition and considers that as satisfying statutory requirements for a site inspection?
Yes. Yes. First of all, thank you for the question and the opportunity to address it. I know it seems like it can be confusing here, but the inspection reports that we receive from the EU under the mutual recognition agreement are inspections that FDA is using to help on the decisions that we make. We would consider that an inspection as if we had done and performed the inspection. As such, the results of our review of that report are captured in our data systems, and our inspections that are conducted by FDA, as well as those under the MRA, would get pulled into our inspection classifications database, and that is a public-facing database where people can see the classification of that mutual recognition inspection report.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have time for one, possibly two questions, and the next question is addressed to Alonza, and here's the question. For foreign PAI inspections, how much time or notification in the current pandemic can facilities expect to get for PAI dates, and also to indicate if the inspection will be on-site or a remote inspection?
Let me again thank you for the question. These are good logistical questions. If that pre-approval inspection has been deemed mission critical, we will, and is foreign, we will reach out to the manufacturing site to coordinate the inspection period. We would, as you know, prior to the pandemic, most of our foreign inspections were announced. Most of our domestic inspections were generally unannounced. We have been pre-announcing all of our inspections out of the abundance of caution due to the pandemic. So yes, we would be reaching out for those foreign sites to coordinate the time period we would be there. We would also be seeking information from a safety perspective to better understand the firm's COVID protocols, how they handle visitors, and any specific requirements they may have for visitors into that site.
Thank you for responding to that question. This will be our last question and it'll be directed to Alonza. What are the outcomes from a 70484 inspection, and will an inspection report be issued? How will a facility be notified when the inspection is closed, and would you be able to give us an idea of the timing of the inspection and closure?
Okay. First of all, again, thank you for the question. These are, very moving examples that are being provided. I think Laurie has done a really great job in sort of differentiating between what is and what is not an inspection. And for purposes of my response, 704A4 records requests do not fit the definition of an inspection. Period after that. Now, with regards to feedback from our review of those records requests, let me sort of separate those into two categories right quick. Those being the records requests that we have requested as a result of a pre-approval inspection, and then those as a result of a surveillance inspection. For those that were requested under pre-approval premise, we have been providing a letter back to those sites, letter we refer to as an assessment issues letter, if we find any deficiencies during the review of our records. And if we don't find any deficiencies during the review of the records, the AIL letter will so state. It's important to note that these are not inspection reports. These is just a letter just to communicate the outcome of our assessments of those records. We piloted that process earlier this year, and we'll be expanding that for all the other types of all the other types of 704A4 inspection, 704A4 inspection requests. I say inspection again, 704A4 records request that we are doing, and it just provides, sort of closes the loop with the manufacturing site that we have received their records, and we either have no further information is requested, or additional information or other type of follow-up will be needed.
Thank you to all of our presenters for your very informative and timely talk, and also to our panelists for numerous panelist discussions for the numerous questions that came in. A few closing reminders. This activity is eligible for an attendance certificate which supports continuing education by SOCRA, RAPS, SQA, and ACRP. Please refer to our website at fda.gov/CDER SBIA for more details.